Silver Pines Academy wasn't just a school, it was a battleground for ideas. Nestled in a wealthy liberal suburb outside Washington, D.C., the school had, over the past few years, become a poster child for progressive education. Teachers attended equity seminars. The school anthem had been rewritten to remove the word patriotic. And in place of the American flag, the main hallway now proudly displayed a massive banner that read, "Celebrate all identities, question all traditions." The latest initiative from the administration? A newly enforced dress code aimed at removing all symbols of division and hate, but the real meaning was clear. MAGA hats, American flag shirts, even crosses and "In God We Trust" pins were now being labeled potentially offensive. Most students knew better than to fight it. They kept their heads down, mouths shut, and hopes low. But that morning, everything changed. Barron Trump, now 17, taller than most of his teachers, and more composed than the entire faculty combined, walked through the front doors of Silver Pines Academy wearing a red MAGA cap. No sunglasses, no smirk, just confidence. Students gasped. Phones came out. Within seconds, half the hallway had turned toward him like moths to a flame. The first authority figure to react was Mr. Landry, the junior year history teacher and proud self-proclaimed radical educator. He wore a Black Lives Matter pin on his vest, had #ClimateJustice scribbled across his whiteboard, and had once said in class that the Founding Fathers were nothing more than privileged slave-owning men with pens. He stepped in front of Barron, arms folded dramatically. "That hat violates our policy," he said loudly, performing for the growing crowd. "We don't allow political propaganda in this school." Barron paused and looked him straight in the eye. "Is that why you're wearing a political pin on your chest?" he asked calmly, nodding toward the BLM button. Landry faltered. "That's different," he said. "That's about human rights." "And this hat," Barron said, still calm, still collected, "is about American rights, free speech, free thought, equal opportunity. Or does that not count here?" A few students chuckled. Someone said, "Ooh," under their breath. Mr. Landry straightened, trying to recover. "Look, we're trying to create a safe space for all students, and that hat makes people uncomfortable." Barron didn't raise his voice. He didn't even move. "If your ideas are so fragile that a hat threatens them," he said, "maybe it's not the hat that's the problem." The hallway erupted. Laughter, applause. A girl near the lockers clapped quietly. Mr. Landry's face turned beet red. "This isn't up for debate," he barked, his voice cracking. "I'm writing you up. You'll be sent to the office." But Barron smiled gently, as if dealing with a child. "Then I'll see you in the office," he said. "And we can talk about the Constitution while we're at it." And with that, he stepped past the teacher and walked toward his first class, leaving a humiliated Mr. Landry standing in a growing crowd of students, who now had a very different idea of who held the real power in the room. It didn't take long. By the time Barron had reached his second period class, a shaky email had already been fired off by Mr. Landry to the administrative office. The subject line read, "Urgent dress code violation, Trump hat incident." Principal Eliza Hamlin, a woman who had built her career on progressive educational reform and anti-bias training, didn't appreciate being caught off guard, especially not when the name Trump was involved. She stormed into her office, already halfway through dialing the school's PR coordinator. "Get ahead of it," she barked. "Make sure this doesn't end up on TikTok." Too late. By lunch, the clip of Barron confronting Mr. Landry had already racked up over 200,000 views. Conservative influencers were reposting it. Memes were spreading. And the school's name was trending on X. Barron sat quietly in the cafeteria, eating a turkey sandwich, surrounded by whispers and side glances. Some students nodded at him respectfully. Others stared like he was radioactive. Then the loudspeaker crackled. "Barron Trump, please report to the principal's office immediately." The cafeteria went dead silent. All eyes followed him as he stood up, calmly adjusted his hat, and walked out without a word. When he entered Principal Hamlin's office, she was standing at her desk, arms crossed, clearly trying to project authority. "Have a seat, Mr. Trump," she said coldly. Barron sat, still calm, still unbothered. "I assume you know why you're here," she began. He nodded. "Because I wore a red hat." She narrowed her eyes. "Because you deliberately violated a policy designed to protect all students from intimidation and divisive political messaging." Barron tilted his head slightly. "So then I assume all the students wearing climate slogans, social justice pins, and anti-capitalist patches have also been called in." She didn't respond. He continued, "Or is this policy only enforced when the politics don't align with yours?" Principal Hamlin's jaw tightened. "This isn't about politics. This is about unity, inclusion." "But only if I conform," Barron said, still soft-spoken. "That's not unity. That's submission." There was a pause, tense and silent. She tried again. "Your presence is disruptive. It's creating division." He leaned forward slightly. "You banned a hat." "Not me. And now you're upset that people are reacting. That's not on me." Principal Hamlin stood speechless for a moment. The conversation wasn't going the way she'd planned. And deep down she knew he wasn't just winning the argument. He was dismantling the entire narrative she'd built her career on. Principal Hamlin stood in front of her desk, her hands gripping the edge like a preacher behind a pulpit. But this wasn't a sermon. This was a reckoning, one she hadn't expected to lose control of so quickly. "I don't think you understand what that hat represents to people," she said, her voice sharpening. "It stands for racism, xenophobia, bigotry. It stands for a man who mocked the disabled, separated families, and encouraged violence." Barron didn't flinch. "Are you talking about my father?" he said evenly. "Or the media's version of him?" Her eyes narrowed. "I'm talking about a president who divided this country, who empowered extremists, who lied about the election, who used the presidency to enrich himself while his supporters worshipped him like a cult." Barron's face remained calm, but his voice now carried just a bit more weight. "You don't know him," he said simply. "You've never had dinner with him. You've never seen him stay up all night worrying about the country while the press tears him apart for breathing." "I don't need to know him," she snapped. "I've seen what his policies did to this nation. I've seen the damage, the debt, the scandals. And now you walk in here wearing that symbol like it's something noble?" He leaned forward slightly. "That symbol stands for putting our country first, for not apologizing for loving America, for believing that borders matter, that family matters, that faith matters." Principal Hamlin scoffed. "Faith? Your father used churches as photo ops. He gaslit an entire generation of voters into thinking they were victims while he lined his own pockets." Barron didn't blink. He gave away his entire presidential salary. Every dollar. Meanwhile, your favorite politicians enter Congress with student debt and leave as millionaires. She opened her mouth, but he kept going. "You call MAGA a cult, but you demand obedience to your version of truth. You say my hat offends people, but your own staff walk around with pins that say F*** the patriarchy, and no borders, no peace. Where's the unity in that?" She was silent for a moment, caught between indignation and disbelief. "You're just a child," she said at last. "What could you possibly understand about the real world?" Barron stood up. "I understand that calling people racist just because they disagree with you is lazy. I understand that banning speech doesn't make it disappear. It just proves you're afraid of it." He walked toward the door, calm as ever. "And I understand that if you really believed in freedom," he added, pausing at the doorway, "you wouldn't be trying so hard to silence mine." And with that, he left the office, leaving Principal Hamlin staring at her reflection in the window behind her desk, wondering how a teenager had just dismantled everything she stood for. Principal Hamlin stood frozen in her office, the silence around her deafening. The echo of Barron's words still hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Her jaw was clenched, her pride bruised. She wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not by a student, and definitely not by a Trump. She picked up her phone, called the assistant principal, and hissed into the receiver, "Prepare a suspension notice. I want it done before the end of the day." Across the hall, someone had heard every word. It was Mr. Alden, a government teacher, older, quiet, and widely respected by both students and faculty. He didn't wear slogans or pins, he didn't tweet. And unlike most of the staff, he still stood for the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. He had heard the shouting through the wall. Curious, he had stepped into the hallway and saw the door slightly ajar. Inside, he saw Principal Hamlin lashing out, attacking the former president, branding students and their families as dangerous, delusional, a threat to democracy. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, so almost instinctively, he pulled out his phone and hit record. Not because he wanted to cause trouble, but because he knew the truth was being buried. By the time Barron returned to class, the school was buzzing. Students had seen the confrontation with Mr. Landry earlier. Now whispers spread that something much bigger had just happened in the principal's office. At 3:12 p.m., as the final bell rang, a video began making its way through student group chats, then Instagram, then X. It was grainy, slightly shaky, but clear enough. MAGA stands for racism. Your father lied to the nation. This hat represents hate. The voice was unmistakable, Principal Hamlin. And across from her sat Barron Trump, calm and composed, responding with reason, not rage. He never raised his voice, never insulted. But he countered every argument with facts, with clarity, and with something rare in politics today, grace. The video hit 100,000 views in under 2 hours. Then 500,000. By nightfall, it was on Newsmax, then Fox, then everywhere. The caption? Barron Trump School's liberal principal, you won't believe her meltdown. The next morning, Silver Pines Academy didn't feel like a school. It felt like a crime scene. News vans lined the sidewalk. Reporters paced with coffee cups and microphones, hoping for a glimpse of the boy who had just taken the nation by storm. Parents flooded the front office with phone calls, some furious, some inspired. Security was doubled. And in the main office, Principal Hamlin sat red-eyed and pale, gripping a folder labeled Disciplinary Action, Barron Trump. She had planned to suspend him quietly, remove the problem, restore control, but that plan was dead. The video had exploded overnight. Even CNN was forced to acknowledge it. On conservative platforms, Barron was being hailed as a hero, calm under fire, dignified in the face of leftist aggression, and most notably, more presidential than half of D.C. And now emails were flooding in. One read, "I didn't vote for his father, but this boy has more maturity than anyone in that building." Another, "Your actions are the reason I pulled my daughter out last year. Thank you for confirming I made the right choice." And another, "Barron Trump deserves an apology, and you should resign." Principal Hamlin slammed the folder shut. Meanwhile, Barron walked through the halls like nothing had changed. No victory lap, no smirk, just the same red hat and the same quiet presence. Some students high-fived him. Others stared, still unsure what to think, but no one mocked him. And then, in second period, something happened he didn't expect. Mr. Alden, the same teacher who had secretly filmed the conversation, paused at the door before class began. The room fell silent. He looked straight at Barron and said, loud enough for all to hear, "Thank you for speaking truth when it wasn't easy." A few students clapped, then more. The principal had tried to silence him. But instead, Barron's words were echoing louder than ever, and in the staff lounge, a quiet rebellion had begun. By mid-morning, every classroom received the same announcement. All students and faculty are to report to the auditorium at 11:30 a.m. sharp. Attendance is mandatory. No one was told why, but everyone already knew. At 11:26, students began pouring into the auditorium whispering, checking their phones, buzzing with speculation. The air was thick with tension. Some were excited, others nervous. But all eyes turned when Barron Trump walked in, calm as ever, still wearing that red hat. He took a seat in the center row, alone. Moments later, Principal Hamlin stepped onto the stage. She looked exhausted but determined, holding a stack of prepared notes. Her microphone echoed slightly as she began. "I know there's been a lot of confusion and media attention surrounding events at our school," she said. "So I want to take a moment to provide clarity and to reaffirm what we stand for here at Silver Pines Academy." She went on to explain the dress code, the values of equity and inclusion, and how the recent incident had created division. But the more she spoke, the more strained her tone became. Then her mask slipped. "And let me be clear," she said, voice tightening. "Wearing symbols like a MAGA hat is not about free speech. It's about power. It's about privilege. It's about the dangerous ideology that tore this country apart for 4 years. And frankly, it doesn't belong in a learning environment." The room stirred. A few students nodded, but others looked uncomfortable. Even some teachers exchanged glances. She continued, now directly attacking Trump supporters. "Let's not pretend this is about patriotism. It's about fear about clinging to a version of America that never existed. About denying progress. About silencing the voices of the marginalized." And that's when Barron stood up. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't raise his hand. He simply walked down the aisle calm, respectful, and stepped up onto the stage beside her. The auditorium fell dead silent. He looked out over the crowd, then turned to her. "May I speak?" he asked. Principal Hamlin froze. If she said no, she'd look like a coward. If she said yes, she'd be handing him the mic willingly. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth, stepping back. Barron took the microphone, looked around the room, and spoke not with anger, but with clarity. "You say this hat stands for hate. I say it stands for love of country, love of truth, and love of freedom. You say I represent privilege. But I've seen the inside of media attacks and public ridicule since I was a child. That's not privilege. That's sacrifice. My family didn't need politics. We stepped into it to serve." The room was so quiet, you could hear breaths being held. "And if believing in borders, in God, in family, and in the Constitution makes me dangerous, then so be it. But I won't apologize for it, and I won't take off the hat." He handed the mic back to her, nodded politely, and walked off the stage to thunderous silence, followed by a single clap. Then another. Then the room erupted. And Principal Hamlin? She just stood there, frozen, exposed, and powerless. The video of the school assembly was everywhere. Clips of Barron's quiet defiance flooded every platform: YouTube, X, Instagram, even mainstream media. Conservative commentators praised his composure. Even moderate liberals admitted, begrudgingly, that he had shown more grace than most adults in office. The phrase, "I won't apologize for it, and I won't take off the hat," was now on t-shirts, bumper stickers, and memes. The school board was in full panic mode. Sponsors were threatening to pull funding. Parents were demanding resignations. And Principal Hamlin? She hadn't been seen on campus since that morning. But Barron Trump didn't gloat. He didn't post a victory video. He didn't even respond to the press. Instead, he returned to class. 2 days later, Silver Pines Academy made a public announcement. The dress code policy had been repealed. All students would now be allowed to wear clothing that expressed their beliefs, so long as it did not promote violence or profanity. But everyone knew what that really meant. MAGA hats were back. On the first day of the new policy, Barron walked into school as he always had, calm, quiet, respectful. But this time, he wasn't alone. Over a dozen students, some conservative, some just tired of being told what to think, walked beside him. A few wore MAGA hats, others wore cross necklaces. One even had a t-shirt with the Constitution printed on it. There were no protests. There were no outbursts. Just a quiet, steady walk into a school that had been changed forever. Outside the school gates, a small group of journalists waited. One approached Barron and asked, "Do you have anything to say to the nation?" Barron looked into the camera and said, "Yeah, you don't have to be loud to be brave. You just have to stand when everyone else sits. That's what freedom looks like." And with that, he walked into the building, head held high, hat still on, and legacy just beginning. If you believe that young voices like Barron's deserve to be heard, if you think it's time we stop apologizing for loving our country, then now is the time to stand up, not just in real life, but right here on this platform. Press like if you're tired of seeing truth being silenced. And make sure to subscribe, because we're just getting started. This is the place where real stories live. Now let us ask you, would you have had the courage to do what Barron did? Let us know in the comments, because in times like these, silence is not an option.